Happy Monday. My name is Nick Dagan Best, and welcome to my astrology live stream. Hope you're all doing well on this fine day. And by you all, I mean whoever might be out there watching right now, live or after the fact. Yesterday we did a team stream, our Sunday team stream, Patrick Watson and I, and yesterday's episode was a sort of follow-up to the episode of Chris Brennan's Astrology podcast about Venus retrograde. So yesterday was a response to the previous episode, and today's live stream is in a way a response to yesterday's, but also to the Astrology podcast. Basically, long story short, Patrick, Chris, and I, when we were preparing to do the Venus retrograde episode of the Astrology podcast, we spent over 3 hours just putting together an outline, and then recording the episode took over 4 hours. Some of which, was had to be edited out for considerations of demonetization by YouTube, the usual culprit. So yeah, there was some stuff that got left out, some really interesting material. Just because like we had so much prepared and it was well prepared, and even in preparing the episode there was a lot of stuff we rejected because it seemed too controversial, even though we wound up handling a lot of other controversial material. So just, yeah, but one thing after another. There's a lot more to cover, and since it's coming up and people are really interested and I have no shortage of material to talk about, I figured we would tuck right in. Elsa X says, sometimes I wonder if Chris has Virgo placements. Lol. No, Chris doesn't have Virgo placements, but he's very Saturnian. I've known him. He's got Saturn in the same sign as his sun, and I met him when he was 20 years old, and I was 36, and he really seemed like the grown up between the two of us. Now, I mean, sure, I had more. By that point, I'd been an astrologer for quite some time. I was a working astrologer. I had done my education with the NCGR back in the 20th century when he was still in high school. So in that sense, I was the older, more experienced guy. But just his character, his temperament, and his really sort of his ruthless standard, of for accuracy, honesty, integrity, that all these things were just sort of, yeah, sort of built into the man. So yeah, he always seemed like a grown up, even at the age of 20. So yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, he's got a lot of Aquarius, and then yeah, he's sort of he's Aquarius rising, Aquarius moon. But indeed, still, just it's all that Scorpio, very, very sort of Saturn guy. All right. Brian Stuppy says, hi, Nick. Great stuff. I've watched the Venus retro video. Could you mention where red 5, black 2 into exactly where they are in the cycle, like just before retrograde or after, etc.? Okay. Well, if I understand, okay, first of all, as I've mentioned before, astro-seek.com now allows you to calculate your own Venus phases and intervals. There's a link in my introduction to the Venus synodic cycle video. In the description, I've put a link to that part of the site where you can do that. So just first off, if no one knows, if you've been hearing me talk about red 5 this and black 2 that, and you don't know what I'm talking about, that video sort of helps explain the Venus synodic cycle to you and how I've broken it down into this sort of system, color and number coded system, and then also the calculator allows you to sort of go nuts on your own time and your own volition to explore the matter in your own right. So Brian's asking me, like red 5, black 2, where they are in the cycle. I'm not sure what part of that question isn't sort of answered by the introduction video. I mean, that was the intention behind the video, was to really lay that out. The black intervals are always evening star, that is Venus visible after the sun is set at night. Therefore, Venus follows the sun in zodiacal order. If the sun is in Leo and Venus is in Virgo, then Venus is an evening star. And in that condition, what's happening is in the evening star Venus is gradually decelerating in speed. We also pay one thing that maybe isn't entirely clear. I do mention it in the video, but maybe I don't sort of hammer it in, hammer the point in, is that the intervals are really a measurement of Venus's speed, whereas the phases, just the lettered black and white, black A, white A, black B, all that stuff. Those are just the phases. Those just determine whether or not Venus precedes or follows the sun, therefore whether it's going to be a morning or evening star. Whereas the four colored intervals, the 20 of them, these are specific measurements of Venus's speed and Venus's changing speed, right? So the all the black intervals, the black 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 intervals, this is Venus after an exterior conjunction. That is, after Venus has made a conjunction to the sun while Venus is on the other side of the sun. And so it's not retrograde. The blue intervals, black follows the blue. And so from there on, Venus has been at its greatest speed. Venus is at its top speed when it's exactly conjunct the sun in an external conjunction in the middle of the blue interval, as it shifts from morning to evening star, from a white phase to a black phase. Right at that moment, the shift between any white phase and any black phase, right at that period, is the fastest speed that you'll find Venus moving at. So after that, Venus is starting to gradually decelerate, gradually slow down in its speed as it heads towards its red interval. And the black interval will end at the greatest elongation between Venus and the sun, when Venus is at its greatest distance from the sun, which is about 50 or so days before the retrograde station. And the red intervals begin right there, where the greatest elongation is. And they continue for 72, 73 days until the interior conjunction, in between which there's a retrograde. Venus slows down finally to a stop, reverses direction, and makes its interior conjunction with the sun. From there, it'll gradually slow down again and stop and start moving forward again. And then it's once again sort of as the sun is moving faster than Venus at the end of the Venus retrograde, we get the next greatest elongation, because there's one in the west and then there's one in the east, as Venus is now. It's actually, it gets kind of confusing. When Venus is an evening star, it's making its greatest morning elongation, or greatest eastern elongation, and when Venus is rising as a morning star, it's making its greatest evening elongation. But I don't want to confuse anyone with that, and that's something, actually, a detail when I remake the video, the next version of the video, I have to correct, because that's one little detail I got wrong in the video. It's very easy to confuse the two, but then I went back and did my reading and realized I'd misidentified the greatest eastern elongation and greatest western elongation, because it's sort of counterintuitive. But anyway, I digress. After the red interval, after Venus is stationed direct, you get a greatest elongation, and that's when the new white intervals begin. And the white intervals are morning star Venus. Venus is now morning star after the red interval, and Venus is gradually accelerating as a morning star. So morning star Venuses are always speeding up, and evening star Venuses are always slowing down. And that's what the intervals measure, and that's what we're looking at. That's what the distinction is. That's why there's a point to breaking Venus down in this way. And of course, the sort of the symmetry of the Venus cycle is as fascinating as anything else. The fact that these 5 retrogrades every 8 years perfectly illustrate the 5-pointed star, the most universal symbol in human history, right? I mean, everyone uses the 5-pointed star. It's on the Chinese flag. It's on the American flag. It was on the old Soviet flag. It doesn't matter, what your sort of nationality is, what your culture is, what your ideology is. That 5-pointed star is this sort of universal image. And there you are. It's a sort of a natural depiction of the natural Venus synodic cycle. Okay, so let's see where these questions are going here. As I catch up. Okay, so yeah, people are sort of trying to explain it. Trying to learn it. Okay. Um, Two question. Chelsea's asking, hi Nick, two questions. One, now that Venus's retrograde is no longer crossing sign boundary, what can I say about it going angular from angular or non-angular houses for natives with Virgo, Leo in the whole sign house system? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it what you always get with the planet sort of crossing sound sign boundaries like that is it merges the affairs of those two relative houses, be they the 12th and the first, or the second and the third, or how whatever the rising sign may be. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's really as simple as it looks in that explanation. If the retrograde just occurs in one sign, then you're seeing something really isolated to the house related to that sign. Whereas if it's crossing over, then you're getting some kind of merging. And astrology is full of that. Astrology is when you're using a horoscopic system. I mean, there's a context in which each of the 12 houses is this unique, separate entity into itself that applies to a very sort of specific set of criteria. And then there's the sense in which all the different houses are merged together by planetary aspect, by, transits that make ingresses and regresses, not just the Venus retrograde, but, all the retrogrades, like the same thing we're dealing with Pluto these days. So yeah, really, I mean, the answer to that is as simple as it might seem. When you're in the context of horoscopic astrology, which is where, generally sort of sign boundaries matter most to me. Okay, now let's see. Yeah, Nick's retrograde cycles for dummies class. Yeah, a lot of people, everyone. I mean, Chris and Patrick, my wife, anyone I discuss my work with on a regular basis. My stepkids, that everyone thinks I should do a course, and I probably should. And I likely will. I mean, I'm very eager and anxious to deliver this material in a sort of cohesive, comprehensive format. Part of the reason I'm doing the live streams is just engaging in this conversation with you helps me. Uh, um, well, first helps me talk about stuff that I've been discovering for a few decades on my own, with little sort of interaction, and but also it helps me just sort of develop my thoughts and say certain things out loud that maybe I'm only thinking in my head, and it helps to sort of get them out there. So you guys are like sort of my notebook of sorts. Stephanie King says she believes she's a blue too. Well, you might be. You might be a blue too. Again, there's a link in the video, Introduction to the Venus Synodic Cycle on my YouTube channel. There's a link to astro-seek.com. So no one need be, walking around wondering what interval they were born under, or anyone else they know, because it's all there at your fingertips. You can do that part on your own now. Stephanie says Venus is retrograding over her ascendant this cycle. Yeah, it's happening to me too. It's a big deal. Like I've said before, it tends to make this very sort of natural period of transition in a person's life. One so sort of distinguishable that if after you're gone, someone writes your biography, those retrogrades over the ascendant seem like a very natural place to begin and end chapters in a book in terms of someone's ongoing story. Okay, so Crushed Orchid says they don't see many examples of blue 1E. Are they not very prominent in history? I'll get to that in a moment. Hanine is asking if I've ever linked up with Gary Caton on the Venus cycle, and would love to see that collaboration. Yeah, I mean, Gary and I are old friends, and yeah, we're certainly drinking from the same well, and we've attended each other's workshops, and we've always. I mean, I'm always following Gary, whatever he has to say, and I think he's generally following me. Collaboration, yeah. Well, I remember in New Orleans in 2012, drinking rum with Gary and Austin Coppock in a hotel room. That was kind of a collaboration. It was just us drinking, and maybe a couple of friends of ours came in and out. But that was a great sort of a great moment where we were all in the same room at the same time and just sort of shooting the S, as they say. But yeah, doing some kind of public thing, it's not out of the question. I know Gary's done some like summit meetings of astrologers to talk about Venus, and certainly I'm always in that orbit, so we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I'm a big fan of what Gary does. Let's see. Okay, well, the questions are getting really interesting, but I'm going to touch on Crushed Orchid's Blue 1E, and then Lambie Girl is asking about Sun Venus Cazimi. And okay, you went to the link. That's the cycle closest your birth under. Okay, wow, the questions are really sort of coming in here. Okay, what I'm going to do just first, I'm going to talk about the Sun Cazimi in a minute, but I'm just going to quickly look at Blue 1Es. I think I just have a file of Blue 1s. And let's see if out of the 12 intervals, I've sort of landed on some more than others. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one is, inconsequential. I don't think any of them are. I'll just run through some Blue E's, so at least you have some kind of context. So, okay, like right now, Dianne Feinstein's in the news these days because she's been a senator maybe longer than some people think she should. Bob Dylan, he's quite consequential to history. He's a Blue 1 Black E. You could do worse than that. Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones, the great Stokely Carmichael. Linda Kasabian, who, she was part of the Manson family, but the one to turn them all in. She was a state witness up to the murders. Elizabeth Warren, she's consequential in history. Okay, well, Marlon Jackson is a rising B, so we don't need to worry about him. We don't need to worry about Brett Kavanaugh either. He's a rising B. Brooke Shields, Tulsi Gabbard, depending on how you feel about her. There you go. We don't need to worry about Yoko Ono or Quincy Jones because they're rising Bs. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she's a rising B as well. Dennis Goldberg, one of the Rivonia trial defendants in the great anti-apartheid trial, the same one that sentenced Nelson Mandela to life in prison. Denny Goldberg was also sentenced along with them. Who else do we have here? Barbara Bush. She's a Blue 1 setting E. Another one of the Rivonia trial defendants, Andrew Mlangeni. Okay, Malcolm X is also a setting E. There you go. There's some great militants in this gang. Una O'Neill Chaplin, who was Charlie Chaplin's wife, and she was only about a week younger than Charlie Chaplin's son, who's a Blue 1. And I've been told I shouldn't laugh when I talk about these kinds of things. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of childish and I giggle. I don't want to pretend I don't take them seriously, but it's gotten me into trouble sometimes in the past. I sometimes giggle at inappropriate times, and it's I do my best to control it, but sometimes it's hard to, and I apologize if that upsets anyone. John Ehrlichman, famous Watergate era. He went to jail on behalf of Richard Nixon because he was his domestic affairs advisor, and he was implicated in the whole cover-up. So he was a rising B. You don't need to worry about him. Byron White, a Supreme Court justice who was appointed by John F. Kennedy, who's also a Blue 1 setting E. I think Byron White was some kind of like sports hero and friend of Kennedy's, and that's how he wound up on the Supreme Court. So they're both Blue 1 setting E's. And then, another Watergate guy, but he's a rising B. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis Presley's manager, Sukarno of Indonesia, who was overthrown in a coup. Who are other rising E's? worth talking about. Some more obscure figures. Isn't Charlie Chaplin? Charlie Chaplin was a red one, so we've seen like this is his brother who's a blue one. His oldest son was a blue one. His last wife, the one who was with him longest, was a blue one. So you do tend to see that those polarities, red ones and blue ones, and or black ones and white ones, and all that sort of stuff. Much in the same way that we see like Leos and Aquarius or Cancer and Capricorn. There's a polarity involved there. Anyway, that's just a little tour of blue ones. I am adding more people to these slides so that they're not. Oh, did I forget to share the screen again? Oh God, I'm such an idiot. That's why I have to remember to share my screen. Okay. Well, too bad. I gave some names, but I sorry, I didn't share my screen. I don't want to spend too much time on that. I will eventually get around to talking about blue ones, black E's, and explaining their role in history, which I assure you is no less than anyone else's. And I'm sorry I forgot to share the screen. I'm really have to improve on that. Okay, words work. Okay, well, thank you for that. Chelsea says question 2 is, oh, well, hold on. I want to get to them. There's a lot of questions coming in. Oh boy. I just want to touch on Lambie Girl's question because I said I would. I've listened to these talks and feel as though I have a very difficult time feeling Venus transits. I have a natal sun Venus cazimi. Is this why? I don't know. That's yeah, but I mean, I wanted to sort of think about it astrologically. I wouldn't necessarily think that's why. It might just be, I mean, what I've found is there is sort of a chaotic agent involved here in the sense that what I do find sometimes is that there are some people for whom Venus retrograde transits are very powerful, even though if you look at their nativities under the sort of uh, the training that we get as horoscopic astrologers, the reason why Venus would be powerful to them is not immediately obvious. But at the same time, that you do see people for whom the Venus transits aren't as popular, but then you can almost certainly count on Mars um, transits being really powerful. So there are different people for whom different planets play a different level of impact in their charts. That's certainly something I would say I see quite a bit, and it's not always obvious that someone's going to have Mars being more powerful than Venus or Venus being more powerful than Mars or what have you. There's still something sort of chaotic about that in terms of really nailing it down. But ultimately, I think the answer to your question is really to that involves exploring your own nativity in your own life and really getting a sense. Maybe you just don't sort of think of the timing of Venus as being as instrumental as it is. I don't know. I would really have to look at the chart to answer that properly. Okay. Cool. Burden of Truth says, "Hi, all. I'm a red one rising E. No affiliations with Russia, though. No. I'm sure a lot of great people are red one rising E without any affiliations for Russia. There's just something about that pattern that really sort of plays out." Um, Elsa says, "Oh yeah, you left a long comment on the astrology podcast episode with some retrograde stories. I read yours also. That was really interesting, and of course, it's all there for everyone else to check out if they want." Um, okay. All right. A lot of stuff here. Yeah, this live stream used to be small enough that it was intimate and I could sort of keep up with the questions and comments, and it was this total dialogue, but it's starting to it's starting to multiply, and I'm not sure I have quite the ability to keep up with everyone. So I'll have to be more more something, more. I was going to say more discriminating, but that word just has terrible connotations. So yeah, I'll just have to be sort of careful in choosing which comments I'm going to respond to. Not because they're not all worth responding to, but I just won't be able to do it in any period of time. Um, I'm gonna share my screen. Earlier I neglected to do that, and I wanted to show slides. Some of this. This is something that I think I'll this is how I'm gonna have to proceed with some of these live streams. Is when I made these slides, I made, a lot of them are sort of, you will have noticed, sort of historical figures, mostly from politics, going way back. Like this white one file starts with Martha Washington and Harriet Beecher Stowe and people like that, and Queen Victoria. But I do have a list of more contemporary people that I'm adding to each of the slides for the 20 intervals, which is going to take me some time. But I figure as I do it, I'll just sort of take you through some contemporary examples, because I know I have my own reasons for studying these, old queens and stuff like that. And it's really useful, because there's such a detachment from their stories that I can study them very carefully. I can read their diaries and their letters and, all this. And, people write books about them, and then other people write books about the books that were written about them, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of material that I can use once people are this old. But I know it's also sort of alienating for a lot of people to try and identify with some queen who lived 150 years ago or whatever. So when it comes to the white ones, I wanted to I've added a few, and I'm going to add some to each of the intervals and introduce them week to week, so it sort of enhances everyone's notion of what sort of people belong to these different intervals. Like, for instance, when I talked about white one earlier, I was talking about sort of like your James Dean and your Peter Fonda, cool people, Billie Holiday and Orson Welles. But I wanted to sort of expand on that. Harvey Keitel was another one, because I've added some other cool people, the Iggy Pop and Ron Wood. Since then, Angus Young was another one I talked about. Other white ones, more contemporary white ones, and this sort of plays in with the sort of the cool guy white one thing. Quentin Tarantino, Johnny Depp, Johnny Knoxville, Ewan McGregor, and Heath Ledger. These iconic actors who, well, Tarantino, not so much an actor, but these sort of iconic cinema people who just have, yeah, they have that thing. Like, if you think of Johnny Depp and James Dean and Heath Ledger, they've got different sun signs. Johnny Knoxville too. Like, they've got different sun signs. They're different people, but there is that sort of um, uh, rebellious, cool guy vibe that they have to them. And then women, Erica Badu, the fact that she's like alongside Billie Holiday, but also Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who I don't have a slide for yet. Really sort of dynamic and musically innovative Black female performers who have a tremendous, I guess these days we call it a brand, but it's really something, brand doesn't really uh, um, describe it, accurately enough. But just, yeah, just like a really sort of unique artistic approach and vision. Other filmmakers like Sofia Coppola, she and her father are both white one intervals. Francis Ford Coppola, Sofia Coppola. I showed Orson Welles earlier. So some, Quentin Tarantino. So some really sort of powerhouse filmmakers, sort of singular visionaries. And the great Stormy Daniels, who is definitely one of my favorite people on Twitter these days. She's hilarious and gives as good as she gets, far better than she gets, I would say. So yeah, there's just some people that I'm adding week to week, and I just want to sort of update um, some of these, personalities, so they become more relatable to you all. And for those of you who are asking about blue fives or blue ones or what have you, every week I'll go through a different interval and introduce some of the new slides that I've put into my slideshow, and maybe they'll trigger some discussion there. Okay, let's see. Am I a YouTube partner? Turn on super chats and acquire some. Yeah, that's on the verge of happening. Um, I just have to activate it. Yeah, I will do super chats. Actually, that is a good idea. I mean, it's something I've been considering, but you're absolutely right. I should just sort of institute it maybe next week. Um, Sempra says, I've been studying Elizabeth the First chart. I've been obsessed with her and history of the 1500s since I was 7. Recently been researching if the AstroWiki chart for Eleanor of Aquitaine is accurate. Yeah, 16th century charts, it can be kind of tricky. You do get lucky sometimes. Let's see here. What do I have with regard to? I study some of this stuff. I gotta, the thing about the British monarchy is it's so vast. There's so much history to cover, that I'm going to be at it for a long time. But I do have a British monarchy file. British royalty. There we are. 346 charts. I have a much larger file just on general British history, and all of these are in there. When it comes to Queen Elizabeth I, there she is. Okay, yeah, we do have documented birth time. Seems pretty good. And Eleanor of Aquitaine. Yeah, I might not have her in here yet. I think I've got like some of the events in Elizabeth's early life when her dad was going off killing her mom and all these other people, and Mary Queen of Scots' surrender, the charter to colonize the New World. That's kind of a big deal. We're still living with the consequences of that. Here's her death and Guy Fawkes, but I think I must also have. I thought I would have the Armada in here, but it looks like I don't. I'm surprised. I really ought to have the Armada incident here. But yeah, you can see there is a sort of general outline of the history of the British monarchy here. Yeah, I'm really surprised I don't have the Armada chart. That's got to change. Okay. But yeah, I can't help you with that particular question, but do keep us informed. And that's one of the things I really want to do, ultimately, is sort of, in terms of what I've been able to do in my lifetime with history and astrology, is get a pretty good grip on a global picture, albeit admittedly more sort of Western emphasized, from about the mid 18th century to present day. That is from about the time of the 7 Years' War, or what in the States they call the French Indian War, which preceded the American Revolutionary War by a couple of decades, 15 years or whatever. And yeah, so from that period until the modern period, I really sort of, I don't just know who the royal like king or queen was, but who their kids were and what their horoscopes look like and who they got married to and when they died and what prime ministers they had to interact with. I know that stuff pretty well, and I've documented it. But the further back in history you go, like I have sort of like what you saw in that file. I have sort of outlines, but not the details. And someone like Queen Elizabeth I really deserves, whether you're like a big stan of the British Empire, or whether you think it's the absolute worst thing that ever happened to humanity, her chart is worth studying. It's not. We give just as much research to the people we loathe as the people we admire, and if we have mixed feelings about a lot of historical figures, that's all the better, all the more sort of human and appropriate. So yeah, that's something to bear in mind. What I really want out of this system ultimately is to be able to study much broader uh, periods of time and human history, and sort of get into as much of a global picture and millennia of documented history, whatever we can sort of absorb into here. some older cultures. I mean, China, ostensibly has documented historical record going back thousands of years. Certainly, Persia, today's Iran, and Ethiopia, and I believe Mali, had cultures that kept calendars and that have sort of documented histories, and I want to be able to incorporate that into the work, as well as just what we do get out of Western history, which in terms of like being useful to astrologers. Ironically, it's Christians needing to calculate Easter, and the way that developed the calendar over centuries. That's actually, as it turns out, ironically, a great boon for astrologers, because if we have documented history, if we have history that we can connect to the calendar, then we have stuff that we can work with astrology. But unfortunately, that's just not. It only goes back so far, and it's limited to European history, and beyond that, just whatever whenever European history winds up interacting with other histories, like when it comes to the First Nations of America, or indigenous people in Africa or Australia. We don't know much about their chronological history. I mean, their histories are studied through archaeology and sociology, but you can't, we don't know a lot of dated events when people migrated or were born, or when battles were fought. But as soon as Europeans are interacting with them, then we know, oh, they fought this battle against the British or whoever, usually the British, at such and such date on such and such time, and then we have a chart. Then we have some idea of how these events connect to this broader historical record. So yeah, that's what I'm sort of looking at. Yeah, Sempris, yeah, I remember the Armada was 1588, 19th July of 1588. Sounds like it could be a red 3. Um, let's see if can the human ephemeris actually be accurate about that. I'm gonna open up I am a Leo rising after all. Sometimes I'm just gonna want to show off. Here, I'm gonna share my screen with you. And I'm just gonna use London for the time zone. We're not worrying about time right now. Just want to get the phase right. You can see Venus quite far from the sun. Looks like it is about to go retrograde. Am I right? Is this a red 3? Nope, just shy of it. So it's 57 days before the retrograde station, which means it's before the greatest elongation by just shy of a week, more or less a week. So this makes it a black 4, but a week before the red 3, which is interesting because, I mean, obviously it wasn't just like one day that the Spanish wound up sailing all around the British Isles and really crashed on the coast of Ireland and all that stuff. So maybe by then it was. I have to look at the timeline, but for some reason I imagine it, by the time the whole thing is played out, that Venus has gone from the black 4 to the red 3, and that there was Venus at its greatest elongation leading up to that. Yeah, good guess, right? I mean, I was only off by a week. There's a really easy way to do that. The Venus synodic cycle is of course 8 years. So you always know, if you're looking at history like century to century, if you know that 1980, like July of 1988 was a red 3. So you know that July of 1888 was a blue 3. And you know that July of 1788 was also probably a red 3. And then you just sort of you can go back, and eventually, because there is a shift, eventually, like you can't be that sort of exact anymore because, as in this case, by the time of 1588, July was actually a little bit before the Red 3 began. But still, it's what allowed me to be close to the mark so quickly. It's not because I have the ephemeris memorized in 1588, but if you, it's just a matter of simple, simple addition, very simple grade 2 math skills, where you can transpose. You can say, okay, like if in 1788, if in July of 1788 you were in a red 3, it's pretty good that you're either in a red 3 in July of 1588, or at least very close, like in this case, a black 4 rather than a red 3. Um, let's see, what else do we have going on here? Oh yeah, one thing I remember, since we're talking about this era in history. Um, Lady Jane Grey, I think her execution. Yeah, there we are. Um, sort of the Liz Truss of the monarchs. That's a terrible joke, but very briefly, she's the 9-day queen of England, and you see, she was born 45 days after Venus went direct. So she is in looks to me like a red 1 interval. Actually, is that right? No, that can't be. No, 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 that can't be. I got to be screwing something up here. Or is it just that? Okay, so Lady Jane Grey, born 45 days after Venus went direct in Virgo. But 1537 would have to be a red 1 year. Just changes so much. Okay. Yeah, yeah, red 1. Okay, it's just, yeah, it's just that, by the 1500s, the red 1 is happening. Um, Back in those days, it was happening in Virgo. This is a retrograde that today goes from Aries to Pisces, but that's how far back we're going here. Anyway, so she's a red 1, and she's proclaimed queen just when Venus is retrograde here, in Leo, in a this is also a red 1. Wow, amazing. Okay, I'd forgotten this part. I just remembered that. Yeah, here she is. She's 16. That's right. Okay, I looked at that. This work is like 12, 13 years old, and I'm just recalling it because she comes up. Okay, so her chart is DD. We don't necessarily rely on this birth time. But again, you get a simple Venus message out of this. Um, she she's proclaimed queen, and 9 days later she's executed. She didn't want to be queen. She just sort of, like, it was an accident of birth kind of thing, although that happens to a number of royals. Uranus conjunct her sun here, and this is her execution after she's deposed, a little while after she's deposed. So she's not, I don't think she's deposed during, she's not executed during the Venus retrograde, but she's proclaimed queen, very briefly during the Venus retrograde when she's 16, which costs her life, because monarchy makes total sense, right? Monarchy, so logical. Right, right. She was thrown into the tower and then executed later. But you can see the most of the story, apart from her execution, her birth, her ascension to the throne, her deposition from the throne, um, her being deposed from the throne, rather. Those things all sort of tie into that same red 1 interval. So there is a little Venus retrograde story in there. That was something, again, I had to jog my memory. It's something, literally, I probably made those charts. God, it's even more than 10 years ago. I might have actually been in England, which was 2002, like 21 years ago when I made those charts. I've been keeping these files for a long time, and sometimes I get involved in a little story. I study it. I do all the research. I make the charts, and then I move on, and I kind of forget about it. So that's, again, another reason why I'm doing this live stream, is it jogs my memory. Like, oh yeah, the Lady Jane Grey thing. That's a really good Venus retrograde. It was a really good Venus retrograde example, that you can extract right there from medieval England. So, Semprus, thank you for your contribution. Right. Yeah, I mean, that whole era really stirred up. I mean, everything that's going on. Well, that the whole sort of Protestant Catholic divide and the way that sort of exploded in that era, and how we have still had to deal with it, at least until very recently. Although it always has risk of surfacing again, whether that be in Ireland or, I mean, hell, my native Montreal, ostensibly, I mean, it's not very religious anymore, but it's got a lot of churches, and the Catholic, excuse me, the Catholic Church used to be very powerful there. And think of it, it's an island city, half of which was occupied by sort of, very serious ultramontane French Catholics, and then the other half by these sort of, um, British Americans, if you will, English speaking North American people. So, and mostly Protestant. And then, English speaking Irish Catholics sort of thrown in the middle, of all that. So it's a peculiar town for that reason. But yeah, it really has its roots in all that. Um, all this kings wanting to get divorced and so on and so forth. Now let's see here. Curious what Venus's Mary looks like. We'll have to go look. She had a really heartbreaking life in terms of love. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to do some more. I've bought a bunch of books too, even about these, from this period of history that I just haven't gotten around to studying yet, or not as much as I want to anyway. I mean, I dabble and dabble. Um, if you mean Queen Mary of Tudor, it's the other thing. There's a lot of damn Queen Marys. It gets, I've got Margaret Tudor, Mary of France, Mary Tudor, and Mary Stuart. So yeah, she's Mary Queen of Scots. Maybe she's who you mean. In which case, yeah, I think Mary Queen of Scots might have been a red two, or no, closer to a blue two, I think. Yeah. Blue two or white three. Yeah, I think this is a white three. It really throws me off. You go back 100 years, and the way everything shifts. I'm not used to a white three being in December, but that's absolutely the way the intervals work. And that's another reason why I introduced the intervals. Um, I introduced the intervals because so we can follow the system over centuries and centuries of time, without having to connect them specifically to the zodiac. Bliss to be says, seeing as I have about 400,000 books, these books behind me, as I've explained recently, they were in boxes in a storage locker for 7 years while I was in South Africa, and that's why they're not organized properly. But next to me over here, there's an equal number of books still in their boxes. And then on top of that, while I was in South Africa, I kept buying Kindle books, and I have over 1,000 whatever of those. So yeah, I'm kind of a book hoarder, and I do read some of them, and I flip through all of them. I don't get any book without sort of getting some sense of it. But yeah, I probably am going to go to my grave without having finished all the books I've bought. And I just, if there was one reason to wish for a longer life, that would be it. Do I have Richard the Third's overthrow and anything? The Boys in the Tower. I think I just have yeah, Battle of Bosworth, and I mean just a few key battles. Tewkesbury, Barnet, Bosworth, and then I always have deaths of the various kings. But not, yeah, see up here, Towton Agincourt. So just some battles and deaths, which is just a really uh, God, I keep forgetting to share my screen. I share it, then I unshare it. But yeah, I uh, just a few charts outlining a basic history of the British monarchy, but it's not the level of detail that it deserves. Um, Elizabeth Tudor book is one I read recently, Mary Queen of Scots by Jane Dunn. Okay, I'm not sure if I have that or not. I will have to look. Dorothy Dunnett. Okay. Jessica Michelle asks, Venus retrograde will stop starting in Libra in 2044. Is that correct? Will stop starting in. I'm going to have to imagine I know what you mean by that. Let's see here. All right. So here we are. This is my own personal calculator of the Venus synodic cycle. And in 2044, yeah, wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. 2042. Well, I got to see Jessica's question again. Yeah, I don't. 2044, there wouldn't be a Venus retrograde in Libra. In 2042, there will be. In 2042, 2042, there will be a Venus retrograde in Libra, as there generally is. 1, 2, 3. It'll start in Scorpio and go back to Libra. Yeah, you can see it goes retrograde at 3 degrees Scorpio and wanders into Libra and goes direct at 18. And yeah, I mean, eventually what will happen in the 21st century is that Venus will stop making retrogrades in Scorpio and start being entirely in Libra. And that'll probably happen in 2058 or 2066, something like that. But the rest of the 21st century will have regular Venus retrogrades in Libra. They've only just started wandering into Libra with the last few passes of the red 2. But no, 2044 is not, unless I somehow misunderstood the question. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. The signing of the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta, I remember making a chart long ago, and I've been looking into it, and at first it looked like there wasn't. Well, I'm going to have to go to my British history. Maybe there's stuff in there that I don't have in my Great Britain. Magna Carta. Do I not have the Magna Carta? I thought I did. Look at that. That's terrible. Magna Carta, I believe, is 1215. I'm sure I had a Magna Carta chart in here. Nope, apparently not. But I know it's 1215. And I'm going to have to look into that. Okay. It was signed twice, 1215 and 1225. I always think of 1215. Yeah, 15th of June, 1215. Let's have a look at that quickly. Oh, yeah, 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 I did look at this long ago, but I'm surprised I don't have the chart, but I remember this being the case. That is a Sun-Venus exterior conjunction. I'm gonna guess that this God, this is going back so long. I think even my document here doesn't go all the way back to there. I go back to 1425. Um, but let's see here. Let's do some transposition. 21, blue 2. Yeah, okay, so this must be a blue 2. Blue 2, which used to happen in Cancer. Yeah, I mean, these days the blue 2 is in Scorpio. By the end of this century, it'll be in Libra. But yeah, back in 1215, it was in Cancer. So you can see when you go back over these long periods of time, um, it really shifts. And again, I guess if we got anything out of this, out of today's episode, it's a great illustration of exactly why I designed the Venus synodic cycle map as I have, so that we can trace this cycle over long periods of time, even as it shifts from sign to sign, and still know that we're looking at the same part of the cycle, because there really is something to that. Okay, I think I'm out of energy. Um, the solo live streams I typically can do about an hour. It's been a really interesting interaction, though. I hope you all got something out of it, and I know I certainly have. If anything, I've been the student. But that's a great position for me to be in. But yeah, thank you for turning it. There was a lot of other stuff I wanted to talk about, but as is the case, I I come into these live streams with, I try very hard not to prepare. I mean, I prepared in the sense that I made those a few of those updated slides that I wanted to share with the audience, and I'll keep doing that week to week and devote some segment of every stream to sort of introducing new faces and names into the Venus Synodic cycle system. Sempris, you're really you've contributed a lot to today's episode, so thank you for that. It's exposed what I do and do not have covered in terms of that material. I'm really surprised I didn't have the Magna Carta, because I certainly remember looking it up, and I guess I just didn't save the chart at the time. Again, we're going back probably 200 years, not 200 years, 20 years. I'm old. I'm not that old. But yeah, back when I was making these chart files, I was in my early mid 30s, and I did not have a gray beard, and my hair was thicker, and I was a lot prettier. But that welcome to your future, folks. This is where it all goes, no matter how dashing and pretty you might have been at one point. Okay, I'm seriously rambling now, so I'm gonna sign off. I'm gonna thank you again for tuning into the live stream. My name is Nick Dagan Best. I'm available for consultations at nickdaganbestastrologer.com. And as you hopefully already know, um, yes, I am available for readings. So just check me out, nickdaganbestastrologer.com. And yeah, I'm doing the team stream with Patrick Watson on Sunday afternoons, or Sunday mornings if you're here on the Pacific Coast at 11. And then on Mondays I do the solo live streams, where I try to fumble around on my own and do what I can. It's always it's always a bit of a struggle for my part, but you guys all make it much easier on me to do these things and get involved in this conversation. Don't make me feel like I'm just rambling into a camera. So thank you again all for your participation, and yeah, I'll see you next week. And yeah, I'm going to start as soon as I'm done here. I'm going to start sort of clipping out clips of these streams and putting them on my regular channel. Oh yeah, and don't forget, in my introduction to the Venus Synodic Cycle video on YouTube, in the comment section or in my description, there is a link that goes to the astro-seek.com Venus interval and phase map calculator. So go check that out. All right, guys, have a great day. Thank you.